They say there are people who save the condemned, secret networks that spirit away those marked for death, that whisper your name in the darkness, and offer escape when all hope seems lost. And I heard those whispers on the night before my execution, heard them promise me freedom, heard them say I would not burn if I trusted them. And I trusted because what choice does someone have when the alternative is fire? When the pyre is already built and the crowd already gathering? When you are 18 years old and about to die for something you are not? And they came for me in the small hours when the guard was drunk. Came with keys that should not have existed and knowledge of corridors that should have been secret. And they led me out of my cell, through passages I had never seen, out into the night that smelled of pine and possibility. And I followed because I believed they were saving me. Believed I was being rescued by righteous people who saw injustice and chose to act. And I did not understand until much later that salvation can be another word for capture. That escape can be the first step into a trap far worse than the one you fled. That sometimes the people who whisper your name in darkness are not saviors but collectors. And what they collect is not gratitude but souls. My name is Verity Blackwood, and I was born in a village near Boston in 1678. Born to parents who were prosperous merchants, who gave me education and comfort and expectations, who raised me to be a wife to some man of their choosing, to be ornamental and obedient and satisfied with a life of managed smallness. And I was none of those things. Was curious where I should have been compliant, was opinionated where I should have been silent, was interested in the running of their business where I should have been interested in needlework. And this made me difficult, made me a disappointment, made me someone they loved but did not particularly like. And when I was 16, and they arranged my marriage to a shipping merchant twice my age, I did what any girl with means and stubbornness would do. I ran. I ran to Salem because it was large enough to disappear into. Because ships came and went, and perhaps I could work passage somewhere. Become someone new. Start a life that was mine rather than theirs. And I found work in a tavern near the docks. Work that was hard and paid poorly but was honest. And I lived in a small room above the kitchen. And I was happy. Happier than I had ever been in my parents' comfortable house. Because I was free, because every choice was mine, because I was building something that belonged only to me. And I thought I was safe, thought I had escaped, thought that distance and new name were sufficient protection. And I was wrong about all of it. The accusation started 6 months after I arrived. Started not with me, but with other women. Women who were odd or outspoken or simply unfortunate. And Salem had always had suspicions, but something had shifted. Some balance had tipped. And suddenly the whispers became shouts. The suspicions became trials. The fears became executions. And I watched it unfold with growing dread, because I recognized what was happening. Recognized that being different was becoming dangerous. That being a woman without protection was becoming a crime. And I tried to make myself smaller, tried to be unremarkable, tried to simply survive until the madness passed. But madness does not pass when it serves a purpose. And Salem's madness was serving many purposes. Settling old grudges, seizing property, establishing power. And I was young and alone and had no one to vouch for me. Which made me exactly the kind of target the hysteria fed upon. The accusation came from a girl named Abigail, a girl barely 14 who had been part of the first wave of accusers. And I did not know her, had never spoken to her, had never done anything that would make her notice me. But she stood in meeting and she pointed at me, and she said I had appeared to her in spectral form, had tormented her, had tried to make her sign the devil's book. And none of it was true, but truth had stopped mattering. And they came for me that afternoon. Came to the tavern and dragged me out while the owner watched. and said nothing because defending an accused witch was dangerous. Was a quick way to become accused yourself. And they took me to the jail that was overflowing with women and children, and even some men. All of us marked for questioning, for trial, for execution. And I was terrified, but I was also furious. Furious that this was happening. That lies could carry such weight. That fear could make people so willingly cruel. The trial was a performance. A ritual where the conclusion was predetermined, and the process was simply theater. And Abigail testified that my specter had tormented her, had pinched her and choked her, and appeared in her dreams. And other girls joined her, girls I had never met, all claiming I had afflicted them, all performing symptoms that looked like genuine suffering, but that I suspected were something else, something rehearsed, something that served purposes I did not understand. And I denied everything because what else could I do? I was innocent. But innocence was not defense, was actually proof of corruption, because the truly possessed would confess, would seek redemption. And my denials made me more suspicious, more clearly in league with darkness. And they found me guilty in less than an hour, guilty of witchcraft and conspiracy with the devil. And they sentenced me to hang in 3 days. And they took me back to my cell to wait for death. And I prayed not because I believed God was listening, but because it was the only action available to me. The only way to feel I was doing something, rather than simply waiting. The whispers came on the second night, came when I had given up hope, when I had accepted that I would die and was trying to make peace with it. Came as a voice outside my cell saying my name so softly, I thought I had imagined it. And I went to the bars, and I saw a woman in the corridor. A woman dressed in dark clothes with her face partly shadowed. And she said she could get me out. Said there were people who helped the innocent escape. Said I would not hang if I trusted her. And I asked who she was, and she said names did not matter. Said only that she and others like her could not stand by while innocent people burned. And she asked if I wanted to live, and I said yes. Said it without hesitation, because I was 18 and terrified, and I wanted to live more than I had ever wanted anything. She told me to be ready, said she would return when the guard was occupied, said I should trust her and follow without question. And she disappeared before I could ask more. And I waited with my heart racing, waited until I heard footsteps, until I heard keys in the lock, until the cell door opened, and she was there with 2 others, a man and another woman, both dressed in dark clothes, both moving with the efficiency of people who had done this before. And they led me through corridors I had not known existed, through doors that should have been locked, out into the night that was cold and clear. And we moved quickly through shadows, through the edge of Salem, toward the forest. And I followed because what else could I do? Because they had saved me. Because I owed them my life, and I did not question, did not ask where we were going or what they wanted, did not notice the way they moved, not like rescuers, but like hunters who had caught exactly what they sought. We reached a house deep in the forest, a house I had never seen, a house that was larger than it should have been, that felt wrong in ways I could not articulate. And they led me inside, and there were others there, perhaps a dozen people, men and women of various ages, all dressed in dark clothes, all watching me with expressions I could not read. And the woman who had freed me said I was safe now, said I was among friends, said I would be protected here. And I felt relief flood through me, felt gratitude so intense it made me weep. And I thanked them for saving me, for risking themselves to help someone they did not know. And the woman smiled and said there was no risk, said they did this often, said they could not stand by while innocent people suffered. And I believed her because I wanted to believe her, because the alternative was too terrible. They gave me food and a place to sleep. A small room on the 2nd floor with a bed and a window that looked out onto forest. And they said I should rest, should recover from my ordeal. And I slept deeply for the first time in days. Slept with the security of someone who believes they are safe. And I woke to sunlight and the smell of cooking. And I went downstairs and found several of them gathered around a table. And they smiled and invited me to eat. And I joined them and they asked me questions. Gentle questions about my life, about my family, about how I had come to Salem, about whether I had any special knowledge or abilities. And I answered honestly, because why would I lie to people who had saved me? And they nodded and made small sounds of understanding. And I noticed they were writing things down, recording my answers. And I asked why, and they said it was simply to keep track of who they had helped, to document their work. And I accepted this because it seemed reasonable. The truth revealed itself slowly over the following days, revealed itself in small things I noticed but initially dismissed. The way the doors were always locked from the outside. The way someone was always watching. The way my questions about when I could leave were answered vaguely, with promises of soon, when it was safe, when the attention in Salem had died down, and I began to feel less like a guest and more like a prisoner. Began to notice that the others in the house, the ones I had thought were fellow refugees, were actually something else. Were not saved but serving, were not grateful but trapped. And when I asked one of them directly, asked a young woman who looked at me with hollow eyes, she said in a whisper that no one left, that salvation was permanent, that we belonged to them now. I tried to leave that night, tried the doors and found them locked, tried the windows and found them sealed. And when the woman who had freed me found me trying to escape, she did not look surprised, looked almost amused. And she said I had misunderstood, said they had not saved me from execution. They had saved me for something else. Said that Salem's witch trials were useful in many ways, provided cover for their work, provided a steady supply of desperate people who would do anything for rescue. And once you accepted rescue, you accepted debt, and debt had to be repaid. And I asked what kind of repayment? What did they want from me? And she smiled that terrible smile, and said they wanted what they wanted from everyone they collected. They wanted service, wanted obedience, wanted me to use whatever gifts I possessed in ways that served their purposes. And I said I had no gifts. I was not actually a witch. I was innocent. And she laughed and said innocence was irrelevant. Said they did not save witches, but they created them. Said that everyone who stayed in this house long enough became what they needed them to be. Said the training would begin tomorrow. The training was not instruction, but transformation. Was a systematic breaking down of who I was and a rebuilding into something else. Something useful. And they used methods I had no framework for understanding. Used herbs and rituals and words spoken in languages I did not know. And I fought at first. Fought desperately. Refused to cooperate. Refused to participate. But they were patient. Said everyone fought initially. Said I would learn just as the others had learned. And slowly, terribly, I felt myself changing. Felt something wake inside me that had not been there before. Felt power that was not mine but that I could not reject. Felt myself becoming exactly what they needed. And the worst part was that part of me welcomed it. Welcomed having purpose. Welcomed being transformed from victim into something powerful, even if that power was not my own. And I hated myself for that welcome. Hated how easily I was shaped. How readily I accepted what was done to me once the alternative became clear. Which was that resistance meant punishment and compliance. Meant something that resembled acceptance, if not kindness. I learned that they were called the Collectors. Learned that they had been operating for generations. Learned that they used every crisis, every persecution, every moment of societal madness to gather people who were desperate enough to accept rescue, without questioning the price. And they built their power through these collected souls. Used us to do work that could not be traced to them. used us to gather information, to influence events, to serve purposes I was never allowed to fully understand. And I learned too that some of us had been accused specifically because the collectors wanted us, that they had arranged accusations against people with potential, with gifts or knowledge or simply strategic value. And Abigail, the girl who had accused me, was one of theirs, was a collector of the desperate, and her accusations were not random but targeted, or business, and I had been selected for reasons I never fully learned, but that I suspected had to do with my family, with their wealth and connections, with my potential usefulness as a connection to the merchant class. I have been here 3 years now. 3 years serving purposes I do not choose. 3 years becoming something I never wanted to be. And I am powerful in ways I was not before, am skilled in things I should not know, am useful to them. And this usefulness has bought me small freedoms, small comforts, has made my cage slightly larger if no less secure. And I have watched others arrive as I arrived, have watched them go through what I went through, have watched them break and rebuild and accept. And sometimes they ask me if it gets easier, and I tell them the truth, which is that it does not get easier, but you get harder. You learn to live with what you have become. You learn to find satisfaction in service, because service is all there is. And sometimes I see in their eyes that they understand what I understood, which is that salvation is not rescue but surrender, is accepting that the person you were died the night you followed whispers into darkness. And what remains is something else, something owned. This is my confession, and I tell it not as warning because warnings are useless to those who are desperate, not as plea because I am beyond rescue myself, but as testimony, as truth that someone should know, that the collectors exist, that they use our own fears against us, that they whisper names and promise salvation and deliver bondage, and that sometimes the people who save you from burning are simply moving you to a different kind of fire, one that burns slower but just as completely. And the only difference is that you are alive to feel it, and you will be alive for as long as they find you useful. And perhaps that is its own kind of salvation. Perhaps survival at any cost is all any of us can hope for. But I remember who I was before they whispered my name. Remember the girl who ran to Salem seeking freedom. Remember what hope felt like before it was transformed into service. And I carry that memory like a wound that will not heal, like proof that I was once something other than what I am now. And perhaps remembering is its own kind of resistance. Perhaps refusing to forget who I was is the only rebellion available to someone who can never leave. And so I remember, I testify, I confess. And perhaps someone will hear these words and understand that when they whisper your name in darkness, when they promise salvation from fire, the wisest answer is no. The bravest choice is to burn, because at least burning is honest, is straightforward,